For Antiwar.com, I'm Scott Horton. This is Antiwar Radio. And introducing our first guest today, it's Dr. Ron Paul. He's a congressman representing District 14 on Texas Gulf Coast in the House of Representatives. And, of course, you all know he ran for president last time. And also he's the author of the excellent libertarian primer, The Revolution, a manifesto, which I highly recommend you go out and get and share with everybody you care about. Welcome back to the show. Ron, how are you, sir?
Thank you, Scott. Good. Thank you.
It's very good to have you here on the show today. Let's talk about warfare. What's going on in Afghanistan? Looks like they went from, I forget how many troops were there in the first place. They said they were going to add 17,000 more, and then they made that 20, and then I think they added another 10 on top of that. Is America kind of starting that war all over again, and how long do you think we're going to stay in Afghanistan?
Well, it's a continuation. I guess there's nothing brand new. The expansion of the war into Pakistan had already started with the last administration. It proves our point that foreign policy stays the same. Interestingly enough, I just recently, within the last hour or two, came from a Foreign Affairs Committee where Hillary Clinton was testifying about foreign policy.
Oh, yeah?
And I got my 5 minutes in and brought up the subject and actually told her that I was pleased that I heard that the rhetoric and the tone of foreign policy was changing and that they were reaching out a little bit. I said, but, words are one thing, but actions are even more important. And so I tried to get her to tell me, where have we seen any significant change? Have you brought any troops home? Have you done anything? And emphasize the fact that Obama immediately increased the military budget by 9% and expanded the number of troops in Afghanistan. And I said, is there any place where you can give me a little encouragement that we've actually had a change, in policy? And the only thing that she could offer was not that they brought troops home or they've cut back in any way, because they haven't. She was saying, yes, we will be out of Iraq. But I think that's a pipe dream, quite frankly. I think there's chaos there, and I think it's stirring, and I think if it gets a little worse, there's no way they're going to, walk away from Iraq, and the troops will stay there. And, of course, they're expanding in Afghanistan, and she testified of the importance of not, dealing with Pakistan because, it was a rogue nation and they had nuclear power. And I mentioned that in my statement to her. I said, the Soviets had tens of thousands of nuclear weapons, intercontinental ballistic missiles. And we talked to Khrushchev, we talked to the Chinese, and we didn't have to fight the Russians and the Soviets. And so I urge her to, maybe be a little cautious. You don't have to get too excited about the fact that, the Pakistanis have this. It's serious, but, there might be other ways of handling this rather than saying that we have to go back in there and nation building. But I'm afraid, as you are well aware, foreign policy doesn't seem to change no matter what they tell us.
Well, it even seems from the point of view of a pragmatic imperialist that messing around in Pakistan is really dangerous because they have nuclear weapons. Here's a country that it's basically a country because they have one military, but other than that, it's sort of a pseudo-state drawn by the British. And here we are messing around bombing in there, and this is how the Khmer Rouge came to power in Cambodia. We disrupted the society so much by bombing the bombing the country during the previous government.
I think that's a good point because they don't have the intercontinental ballistic missiles. They are not a threat to the United States per se. But locally, if we have large bases or troops marching in or getting involved inside of Pakistan, more than just drones, they might just want to test one of their weapons and cause chaos there. So you're right. The disruption is the most important problem, and just think of how things finally got settled in Vietnam once the French and the Americans left.
Well, now, Dr. Paul, I think some people might be surprised to hear you say that you don't think anything really is going to change in Iraq, even though they're escalating in Afghanistan. They have promised that by the end of 2011, they're going to have all the combat forces, and in fact, I think they even say all forces out as per the status of forces agreement. What indications do you see that leads you to believe that that's, so much smoke and mirrors?
Well, because they never said they would close down the bases. They never said they would back away from $1 billion embassy, and they never have changed their policy of maintaining stability. They're just hoping that they can do it without American troops. They wanted to rename them. They won't be combat troops, but they would keep them there. And they're expecting, the puppet government and the local forces that we have trained. The tragedy is the instability exists, and we've trained both sides. We've trained Sunnis and Shiites. And I don't think all of a sudden the Sunnis who have been kicked out of power all of a sudden love the Shiites who are more likely to be allied with the Iranians. So I think it's unstable, and therefore, with the weapons that we have provided, that violence is going to break out. And if we do back away, let's say they bring half of the troops home and are sincere in what they tell us, and by the time they remove 50%, what if the violence is multiplied 3 times? There's no way. There's no way they're going to, leave. And then there's the possibility then that one of our bases would be hit. And what I fear most is something like that, some big weapon getting in, and some problem comes, that some bomb goes off that literally kills hundreds of Americans, as it did, in Beirut when the Marines were killed. Fortunately, I think for us in our country is, although Reagan made a mistake by putting those troops there, he at least said, "I'm coming out of there. I didn't realize how dangerous and how irrational these people were." So he left and admitted he made a mistake by going in. That's not going to happen today. If a ship is sunk or an American plane goes down and they want to blame Pakistanis or the Iranians or something, I'm afraid that the American people would overwhelmingly support massive escalation and even make it a bigger deal than the Gulf of Tonkin resolution or going into Iraq. That's what we have to really worry about.
Yeah, in fact, looking back on that, it's almost like only Nixon can go to China. It sort of took somebody with Ronald Reagan's Cold Warrior stature to be tough enough to withdraw troops and still stand up tall, and then I guess go take it out on the people of Grenada or whatever later. But if it had been, Jimmy Carter or something, he would not have been able to get the troops out of there. The pressure would have been much tougher on him to stay longer, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, I think so. And it seems like when a Democrat gets in power, they have to prove that they're appealing to conservative militants. So they go overboard in trying to emulate Republicans. But what do the Republicans do when they get in? They want to neutralize Democrat big spenders on welfare. So we as Republicans then come in, like the Bush administration did, and expand with the welfare domestic spending. And then since both sides are supported, that's why in the midst of a financial crisis, the deficits explode. The significant figure that I've looked at just recently is that 12 months ago, our national debt was $2 trillion less than it is now. It went up $2 trillion in 12 months. That's the rate of indebtedness that we're incurring. So that's very dangerous. And I even pointed this out to Hillary today that great nations end not because that they get defeated militarily. We didn't have to defeat the Soviets. They end for economic reasons. And I think that's what's going to happen here. And I even brought up the subject of the American empire. But she, of course, she was very, very friendly. And I've actually even made some very positive comments about the Ron Paul supporters, which really was a shock. And it was very pleasant. She said, boy, you really have some, she went out of her way to be friendly toward us, and complimented our supporters on how energetic they were and how determined they were.